Joining me now on what role China can play in tackling climate change is Wu Changhua, the Greater China Director at the Climate Group. Thank you very much for joining us. China is currently responsible for the biggest amount of carbon emissions in the world. What are China's plans to cut back on those emissions to meet those targets to stop the amount of greenhouse gas emissions getting into the atmosphere?
China has to lead a global clean revolution, and China today is well positioned to take the action today. So yes, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is very, very critical. But more importantly, the alignment of domestic declared war on pollution and the global efforts to tackle climate change today put China is in a very well position in terms of restructuring its economy, restructuring its industry, and literally the transformation. If you look at the reality, we set the policy targets around energy efficiency, we set the targets on renewable energy, and also set the targets on circular economy, clean technology development, and very importantly, you started to see Chinese companies joining on board. So with all the things coming together, China today has to, and is already starting taking the step towards a clean future.
Well, we got these talks coming up in Lima. What does China expect at those talks? What do you think will be achieved?
Lima is in the transition period, and the countries need to come together to share, to exchange, and also hopefully getting closer to agreement. If you look at the efforts today, and three largest economies, China, US, and EU, are ready to put their proposals on the table. The APEC announcement between President Obama and President Xi Jinping around China's efforts around capping its emission before 2030 or no later than 2030, and the US made also commitment on the table in terms of continued efforts to reduce emissions, and the EU said by 2030 at least actually to reduce its emissions 40% over the 1990 level. And hopefully all those announcements on the table today will be able to incentivize, boost, actually encourage other countries also come on board to put serious commitments on the table so that we'll be able quickly to reach a consensus and agreement leading up to Paris.
Right, talking about other countries, China is looking beyond its own borders in the efforts to combat climate change. We have Su Wei, who's Beijing's top climate negotiator. He's a senior official of the National Development and Reform Commission, who said developed countries should continue to take the lead in cutting emissions by large margins and at the same time provide developing countries with support for financing, technology, and capability building. Talk to us about those proposals.
There's a very popular phrase called common but differentiated responsibility, and that's one of the fundamental principles the international community has agreed to adhere to. Because when you come to multilateral efforts, principles need to be put on the table, agreed upon, so that we'll be able to make rules. So industrialized countries already made their serious commitment on the table, saying they're going to take the leadership in terms of reducing emissions on their own part, in the meantime providing the necessary support, the financial, technical, and also capacity building for other developing countries. But we all know actually, for many, many developing countries, including China, we cannot only rely on the efforts or support offered by the developed countries. The current proposal or the principle on the table basically said industrialized countries need to take their fair share, they need to offer their support. But very, very importantly, we need to find out how to work more closely together, particularly from developing countries, how to make sure they do not repeat the mistakes by the industrialized countries over the industrialization process, and trying to figure out how to build up a low carbon or green economy to the future, so that we'll be together, we will be able to grow our economy, but in the meantime to seriously address greenhouse gases emission issues to tackle the climate change.
Thank you very much for joining us. Changhua Wu talking to us from Beijing.